Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Pensions Committee and Board. Just to start off, my name is Armin Mahboob. I'll be chairing today. And yeah, just to run through the agenda. So this meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live and subsequent broadcasts via the Council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. We currently only have apologies from Councillor Hymas. I don't believe there's any other apologies, and there is no urgent business. On item 4, do members have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, we will continue. So item 5 is deputations. We currently have one deputation. You have 3 minutes to speak. Yes, could you take a seat?
Dear members of the Pension Committee, we are from Haringey and Tottenham Palestine Action, a network of neighbours from across the borough concerned about Palestine. We'd like to thank Councillor Mark Blake for his intervention at the last committee. We welcome the opportunity to work with you towards a divestment from companies like Elbit, who are guilty of human rights abuses, including the production of cluster munitions, from companies supplying weapons and military technology to Israel, such as BAE Systems and Lockheed Martin, and companies active in building or sustaining Israel's illegal settlements, including Israeli banks and companies such as Airbnb and Booking.com. We are so ashamed as residents of Haringey to know that money from our borough is playing a role in the ongoing genocide in Gaza. We want to remind you that over 31,000 people now in Gaza have been killed in the last 150 days. We urge you to attend to this matter quickly, especially with the looming anti-BDS bill trying to quell movements towards divestment. This is public money, and we should get to choose how it is invested. We also remind you of your own ESG targets, reflecting in the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment. Following the ICJ ruling, we want to remind you that any arm of government in Britain is required to prevent genocide, which includes not financing industries enabling genocide to take place. Finally, we have been repeatedly told that Haringey Council has no power to act on what is happening internationally. But the issue of pensions financing genocide shows at least an area where this council could make a vital intervention. The situation in Palestine translates to the local level through pensions, and it is our responsibility, and we urge you to do everything in your power to divest and take responsibility that there is no complicity in the genocide. As mentioned, we would like to work with you and propose an action research group where we can collaborate moving towards divestment. We look forward to working together on the basis of no investment in genocide. We're available for questions, especially my two colleagues who've done most of the research that I've been speaking to.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind just turning off it gives feedback sometimes. Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for coming along today to give your deputation. This approach sets the tone for the rest of the response that we're going to give. And we just wanted to go through some of the actions that we went through since the deputation had came through. So since the deputation came through, we have requested advice from officers and appointed advisors. We have raised inquiries with the relevant investment managers, and we have met as a group to better understand the current investment position in relation to these matters and consider what actions can or cannot be taken by the fund. We do have to understand kind of the legality of our fund and what we're kind of responsible for. So just to outline our regulatory and legal requirements of an LGPS fund, funds must take advice on investment strategies. So we can't just yeah, we can't just move money around really. We have to take advice. So it's done strategically. Funds must invest in a wide range of investments, and Haringey Pension Funds has and continues to comply with both of these requirements. The long-standing policy to invest in the equity market using passively managed pooled investment funds is very common around a lot of LGPS funds. I mean, the pros are that it achieves asset diversification, it's low cost, there's a likelihood to meet obligations to scheme members and local council taxpayers. Obviously, the cons are it's not always feasible to implement exclusionary policies targeting specific companies or sectors. But I'll get into that later on how we're trying to mitigate that. Pooled investment funds generally replicate global indexes such as the MSCI All World, the S&P 500, and the FTSE 100. The MSCI Global Low Carbon Target Fund, which you guys have mentioned, is what we're kind of going for. It's compliant with the UN principles of responsible investment. And it's essentially a low carbon exposure relative to the main index, rules-based approach, not exclusionary. We are looking to have a responsible investment policy development framework created to kind of meet some of the things that you've approached with. But I'll get into that in my kind of closing statement. But before that, I'm going to ask some of the members of the board to ask you questions. So just to start off with Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Just a question and to give a bit of context. So we take the issues that you've raised really seriously. All our investment and our managers sign up to the United Nations Principle of Responsible Investment. They're all signed up to that concept. And we had the London Civ here just earlier before you doing a presentation, and they work similarly. So when they consider ESG and investment issues, they consider the climate issue, they consider the tax transparency issues of all the companies, they consider the company's HR issues and their diversity issues. So it's a big subject that we put a lot of effort and research into, and we also are a member of the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum, who do a lot of input to company AGMs. They meet company directors to raise all these various issues. So I know this is a bit wider than the issue that you raised, but I just wanted to ask you and make you aware that we do a lot of work covering this whole aspect, this whole sort of scene of responsible investment.
You may respond.
I mean, I'll take, you go ahead, Pip. Go ahead. I mean, just to say the criterion should include not investing in arms manufacturers, in particular when they're, I mean, British Aerospace made 2.3 billion last year. I mean, it is the biggest manufacturing company in the UK, but it deals in death and we can see it before our eyes. So that should be one of the criteria.
I would just like to add just the necessity of acting with complete urgency on this. You know, in the last 24 hours, 97 Palestinians were killed, 124 were wounded. We've seen absolutely horrific images coming out of Gaza because of the consequences of the weapons being used that are manufactured by Elbit Systems, by BAE Systems. So I was a bit surprised perhaps when you opened and you said there wasn't any urgent matters, because frankly, in my opinion, this is the most urgent matter, because every day Palestinians are being bombed and every day Palestinians are starving from the Israeli imposed starvation.
Just a quick follow-up, if you wouldn't mind, I'll let you continue, but are you aware if those specific companies, BAE or Lockheed Martin, are invested by us?
Yeah, I'll take that if that's okay. So the data that I used were the council's most recent, I think, draft report for the 2023 ending 2023 financial year, and the MSCI constituents that's available on their website, which is up to date to the 31st December 2023. I also used a sheet on the constituents from I believe it was the Rougher Total Return Fund, which is one of the ones that the London Civ holds in one of its named funds. I'm afraid I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. But that data sheet was up to date to, I think, the 31st of June 2023. And so looking at those and looking at the council's holdings as listed in their report, we were able to see that the council invests a total of more than £1.5 million across Elbit Systems, Lockheed Martin. We know there's some in BAE Systems, not Caterpillar, I'm afraid, and then 3 of the Israeli banks that invest heavily in the construction of illegal settlements.
Sure. So I've just been informed we ourselves don't have any investment in them, but we will double check with the LCIV and Rafa. If they do, we'll double check with them. Councillor, no. We will continue with the allocated questions. Then I believe Keith, you had a question.
I want to speak more in a personal capacity. I'm very sympathetic, and in fact, I was actually working for UNRWA in the 70s and 80s, and we were concerned about getting the teaching facilities in the camps in Gaza. So I was going to Beirut and then subsequently to capital of Austria to facilitate that. I was also involved in the anti-apartheid movement and getting funds to be free of South African investments. And the anti-apartheid movement managed to get South Africa free portfolios in the same way that the environmental people managed to get low carbon indices. The key to it is difficult for us because some of the reasons have been outlined. The cost for us to transfer from an index approach to a fully discretionary approach where people could eliminate company by company would cost us about £3 million a year. It's very hard for us to justify £3 million when our first priority is to provide pensions to the people in the scheme. However, so the key thing to do is if you want to get this done is to create an investable universe. So it's with talking to the people like MSCI, to the London Civ, to anybody, or LMG, Legal & General, any of those people who provide index funds. And once they have an index fund, which then we can invest in at a comparable cost, then it becomes feasible to make those transfers. So the issue is get an investable universe that can be done. That's what anti-apartheid did. That's what the environmental lobby have done. If you do that, then it probably can be done.
I mean, we're both of a certain age. I was heavily involved in anti-apartheid as well, and I do know it was also the weight of public opinion, people mobilising on the streets. And I mean, all decent folk were on the side of ending the apartheid regime. And I mean, you have more power to do what you're advising than we have, right? I mean, as a big investor, you are the ones who can put pressure to change policy to set up an index fund which has a certain policy of not investing in Israel. I mean, you must have more power than we have that because you have a lot more money than we have. I mean, we're just ordinary constituents.
The weight work to the apartheid because you study a man called Sullivan, Reverend Sullivan, who actually did the work to create the index. And then he provided the principles for applied to in the anti-apartheid movement. There was a man, Reverend Sullivan, who created the principles under which would allow companies to be South Africa free or not free. It's a very complicated issue. Believe me, it really is very hard to pull a line because it's not just making the armaments. Do you then restrict the company that's supplying the steel? Do you send the company that provides the paper? You know, there's got to be some sensible lines at which you come. He worked on those things and made it feasible for then the investment management companies to provide indices which could then be applied. And I think that is the route for you.
I'd like to jump in on that and just say that other councils and pension funds have already divested from this. There's numerous pension funds across Scandinavia, including Norway's pension fund, who have already divested from Albert Systems, as has Australia's Future Fund, as has closer to home East Sussex. And I think the question for you all is, can you all retire comfortably knowing that your pension and your financial security came at the expense of the lives of over 30,000 Palestinians, 70% of them women and children? Can you all feel happy with your retirement fund, knowing that Palestinians had to die for your security?
Sorry, just to add, I mean, there is a difference between deciding a policy and the mechanisms of its implementation, right? We're asking you to decide a policy, and of course we are offering actually to cooperate with you in its implementation, right? But the policy statement is all important, and as is rightly being said, it's important right now.
Just on the last question from Councillor Ngara.
Look, we all here have sympathy what you've just said, but we have a responsibility to the members of this pension fund, and we take that fiduciary responsibility very, very seriously. I don't think, I mean, the last statement you make, I think, is not a fair and accurate statement. So I think you should reconsider that last statement that you made. You know, we all are heading in a direction. We can't just sell. We don't buy these shares and that we can just sell them tomorrow. We are in a journey. We believe that we have much sympathy with you, and we will try and work with you to develop policies going forward. But these things take time, and I'm sure Ahmed will address this in his final statement. Thank you.
Well, really, just to repeat, there is urgency to the situation. I mean, it's extremely well documented. There are 2 major court cases to the ICJ. 50 governments are supporting the second court case, which is about the illegal occupation of the West Bank. But we all know, just on Thursday, there were over 100 people were killed. And the bombs, the munitions, the aircraft being used are being supplied by companies in this country, which Haringey, as far as we can tell, and as far as our research tells us, has got very significant investments in, right? So this is a matter of how far does complicity go? And you have to weigh up complicity with genocide, which is a higher legal requirement than any fiduciary responsibility, because there is a complicity of benefiting from genocide. And is no question that if the ICJ ruling goes through, then complicity with genocide will be part of the judgment. I mean, and this, whether it's legally binding or not, this is absolutely a 100% moral issue with great urgency, as was apartheid. This is today's apartheid.
Thank you. Thank you again for your statements. I think just to come back on kind of the policy work that we're doing. So as I mentioned, we are working on a responsible investment policy that we'll be speaking about and developing. So that should, I guess, mean that we invest in a responsible way. So that'll be happening, and we'll be updating you, and we'll send you a response on where we are at and what's happening with that. I guess with the with the investments that you're speaking about and the different funds that you're talking about that have managed to divest, we're happy to research that and give you a written response on that and see what they've done. But currently we are working on a policy to, I guess, look into this and invest in a responsible way. So, but I do thank you for coming along today. And giving your deputation is something that, you know, requires a lot of time, requires a lot of organization. So I do really appreciate that. And thank you very much. I will ask you to go back to the seating area. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting as well. Thank you. Okay, we will move to item 6. So a record of training undertaken the last meeting. Is there any training that's been taken since the last meeting? Councillor Bevan?
I've submitted my last couple of months' training.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anything else? No? We will move on to item 7. This is the minutes. I will take it as read. Is there any comments on the minutes?
Only the dates of the next meetings seem to be the dates of last year's meetings.
Yeah, that was an error on my part. So yeah.
Just shows I read them.
Thank you for those eagle eyes, Keith. Is there any other comments? No? Do I take as, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to comment on the comment around the dates of the next meeting. So just to confirm that those dates have not yet been agreed, but communication will be going to members shortly to confirm them.
Thank you. Do we approve the minutes? Approve. Okay, I will move on to item 8, which is the pensions administration update. Yeah, would you, Jamie, would you like to take it away?
Cool, thank you, Chair. So I'm going to present the administration strategy update. So a bit of background. So the regulations state that the administration authority may prepare, maintain and publish a written statement outlining their policy on administrative matters. So this is covered under Regulation 59 of the Local Government Pension Scheme 2013 regulations. This report provided the Pension Board and Committee with a draft version of the Pension Fund revised administration strategy. Section 3 recommendations. We asked members to agree that the statutory consultation to be carried out on the revised administration strategy, and to note that the revised strategy will be brought back to the PCB once the consultation has been concluded. The revised administration strategy is attached as Appendix 1 of this report. So the administration strategy aims to kind of give a clear understanding to both the administration authority and the scheme employers of their responsibilities, the performance expectations, and emphasising accountability. So following the discussion with members of last meeting, the key change we made to the administration strategy was to update the KPI, the key performance indicators, to align them with the CIPFA benchmarking KPIs. So the aim is to have the revised strategy will take effect from the 1st of April, and the KPIs will form part of the basis of the performance monitoring going forward. The administration strategy will be reviewed every 3 years or as required by the regulatory changes. The rest of the strategy remains largely on the same content. However, we have made it more concise and easier to read. In section 6.6, table 1 outlines the KPIs which we are going to be adhering to, alongside the legally required response time in months. So moving forward, when making changes or updating the administration strategy, the administration authority must consult with its scheme employers and such other persons it considers appropriate. If agreed by the Pension Board Committee, we will begin the consultation process adhering to the principles set out in section 8.4 of this report. And then following the consultation, a further report will be brought to the PCB for a decision on the revised administration strategy. And I'd like to welcome any comments on the strategy.
Councillor Bevan?
Well, perhaps you can clarify, because I'm getting a bit worried, because on page 11, it's got the KPI response times. I'm not quite sure if that's a target or whether what we're actually achieving, but when you compare it with the legally required response times, which are all about 2 or 3 days, when all those other ones are a huge number of days, I'm a bit confused. So what are we meeting at the moment?
Apologies. So the left-hand column, the KPIs are in days, and the right-hand column are in months.
So would it be? Is it problematic for us to meet these requirements that are listed here, resource-wise, etc.?
So yeah, these are tighter than the current ones we have, but I do believe that we can meet them, and it will kind of give a better member experience because they'll get estimates quicker, pensions will be paid quicker, and they'll kind of be more engaged with the pension fund.
John, I think you wanted to comment on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think from a governance point of view, we should really commend, or members should commend this report. I mean, the basis of the way the pension committee or the pension fund works is it's a partnership between the administrative authority and the employers. And without the two working positively and collaboratively together, it can't work. And this is an attempt to make it work and to make it better. And I think what's on page 11 in particular for the members. So I really would commend the officers for putting this forward. It is more challenging, but we're laying it out in a clear way to the employers. The employers are going to get the chance to comment on this and come back to the officers. Hopefully the employers will see the sense of this, and it'll be a better service for the members, which ultimately is the aim. So it strikes me that here we're attempting to put, forward a strategy to create a better operational environment. And to my mind, this is very good practice. That's just my thought from where I'm coming from.
Yes, I mean, John is exactly right. So the spirit of this update has really been as a focus of improving the member experience. So you see that the legally required response is 2 months, but let's say there's been a death in the family. Acknowledging that death and the letter that they received in 2 months feels way too long. So what we're looking to do is improve that member experience. So within a timely fashion, they receive that information, their benefits are paid out, and there is not as much stress on the member experience itself. So CIPFRA, who we've decided to go alongside for this benchmarking, they'll also provide benchmarking that will support how this fund is performing compared to other funds who are participating in that particular scheme. I'm not sure how many funds actually signed up to it, but there's quite a number of them, and this is what we'll start bringing forward to this pensions committee and board. So it's just to emphasize that this is mainly focusing on improving that member experience, and I think we have discussed and looked at the resources we have at the moment, and we think we'll be able to meet those targets.
Councillor White, then Councillor Costa.
Thanks. Yeah, mine was just about the KPIs as well, because what is missing from the report is where the KPIs were prior. So just an idea of how much harder we're making the task, how much tighter we're making them, and I think Sean asked this anyway. Where were what those KPIs were previously? How well were we doing in hitting them?
Yeah, I don't actually have to hand the previous KPIs to give a comparison, but I can get that for members and send it out to reflect the difference. In terms of the current meeting the KPIs, across most of the casework, it's pretty good. High 80s, low 90s. The only one that may be struggling a bit were the transfers, and that was due to kind of the new team being put into place, and that's kind of one thing that gets kind of put to the one side. But that's now coming up to a more respectable level. But again, we can give the comparison to let you know how much tighter it is.
Yes, so just to add to what Jamie has mentioned, so if you recall in the previous meetings, we've started producing this KPI as part of the admin report, and it was articulating the performance or outlining the performance for the fund. And Jamie pointed out at the previous meeting that some of those performance issues, what we were sort of working towards in terms of improving it. The CIPFRA ones are a bit tighter. There are also newer ones that we were not previously tracking. So we'll definitely be able to provide you with that assessment. But this is basically based on that conversation that was had in previous meetings. We've explored that. We've seen that CIPFRA is something that, one, we can compare against, and we'll be able to monitor and measure and improve the performance in the fund over time. And this is why we've sort of been included as part of this report.
Councillor Costa.
Councillor White asked my question and Tim answered my question without even asking it. So.
It's great when that happens. Is there any other questions on this? Nope. Do we agree that a statutory consultation be carried out on the revision to the pensions administration strategy, which has been included at Appendix 1 of this report? Brilliant. And we note that the revised pensions administration strategy will be brought back to the PCB after the consultation has been concluded. Thank you. Let's move on to item 9. That's risk register. Tim.
Me again. Thank you. So I'm going to present the Haringey Pension Fund Risk Register. So the report aims to update the Pension Board Committee on the Pension Fund Risk Register and provide an opportunity to further review the risk score allocation. So we ask members to note and provide any comments on the Fund Risk Register. The area of focus for today will be on the administrative-based risks, which are contained in Item 2, Appendix 1. So the identified risks have been reviewed and scored, and we are seeking members' views on the scoring and controls and mitigation currently included in the appendix. Just to remind members, we use the RAG system, red, amber, green. Each risk is assigned a score ranging from 1 being low impact, unlikely, to 5 high impact, very likely to occur. So on Item 2, Appendix 1, there are 6 risks that have been identified. And they are significant structural changes in an employee's membership / large transfers out. Incorrect data due to employee error, user error, or historical error leads to service disruption. Concentration of knowledge in a small number of officers and risk of departure of key staff. Failure of financial systems leading to benefits to scheme members and supplier payments not being made. Failure of cybersecurity measures. And failure of securely sensitive data, any identified data flows being sent insecurely. I'd like to point out that the key risks identified in section 6.5 have remained largely the same, and there have been no material changes since the last meeting. So I'd like to welcome members to make comment on the risks and the scoring we have given them.
I see no hands. So do we know? This okay. Go on, Councillor Gordon.
Sorry, no one's asking a question. So, and ask actually, is it possible with the risks to have an arrow saying stable, going up, or going down? Because sometimes we don't see maybe the bigger picture. I know it's useful. The one below in table Appendix 1, where you have essentially put 2 different scores there. That's helpful. But I think in 6.5, it's just useful. I know it's all red, but it's useful actually. Is it going up, coming down, or stable? Could I, just a suggestion. Thanks.
Yes, we will note that suggestion. I think I've seen that done before, so we'll explore how best we can incorporate it into this report as well.
Councillor White.
Thanks. I'm going to ask a question again about the delay of publication of statements of accounts. So obviously we know that this is a national issue. It's been going on for a long time. We haven't been able to publish our accounts for 3 successive years now, and no end to this problem is in sight. So I suppose my question is, obviously we're required to publish these accounts by a particular deadline. We've missed that deadline for 2 or 3 years. Everyone's in the same position, pretty much. So we're not going to get penalised for that, hopefully, because it's not our fault and everyone's in the same position. However, does the inability of us to publish our accounts, other than, the fact that we are required to do it and there may be a penalty, which I'm obviously leaving to one side now because I don't think that's going to be a problem, is that a problem for us in any other way?
Yes, thank you, Councillor White, for your question. So I would just make maybe a bit of a clarification to your question. So the Council and the Pension Fund has published a draft set of accounts. Those accounts have not been audited. So for them to be properly ratified, to ensure that all the accounting has been done correctly, that the fund is running as a going concern, you need an external auditor to essentially come in and give that give that statement and that opinion. So I think previously we've had the auditors come and present to this committee and outline their plans. Our engagement since then has been very limited. We've made various efforts to try and engage with them to see how best that work can progress. And the response we've had is what you've just articulated, that this is a national issue, there's resourcing issues, and also sometimes they go and have to look at other public sector bodies. So it's become an issue now where the government has actually identified this. I think my understanding is only about maybe 40% have been done in, is it the 2020, 2021, which is the kind of the first trouble year. But if you're looking at like the previous financial year, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 that have been completed. So the government is currently working with our system partners, which I think we've updated in this note, which include the Department for Levelling Up, the FRC, Financial Reporting Council, and the National Audit Office to come up with a solution as to how to treat these outstanding backlogs. What is likely to transpire based on what's in the Constitution is they are not going to necessarily qualify the accounts because it's going to be improbable for them to catch up on all these accounts. What they're terming is they're going to put a disclaim, which means that nothing based on the work that the auditor has done to date would suggest that there are any material issues with the fund. So the reassurance I can give you, and again, I'm not the external auditor, is we have worked quite a lot, especially on the 2021-2022 accounts with BDO. They've done a lot of work, and our expectation would be the outcome of that would be the majority of the fund has already been done, that these 4 key areas, we didn't get time to do them, and on that basis, we're disclaiming the accounts. However, I would just caution that this is still an outstanding consultation. What the final guidance from the government would be, we don't know. And also, this is not an issue that the pension fund can have an impact on, because the way that the agreement is done, it's through the council. So the pension fund accounts are a subset of the council's group accounts. And the opinion is really on the council, and the pension fund feeds into that. The auditor then does some work, so we can publish an annual report and we can put it on the website. And we did present the annual report, I think, at the previous meetings. So that will be on the website. So we've published that. What's just lacking is the auditor to come and give that affirmation that the work that myself and the team have done is actually compliant with the rules and up to scratch. So I'm obviously very confident in how the team is working, but I'm also kind of cautioning that this is something that is out of our control and more for the auditors and the audit firm to figure out in accordance with the government.
To briefly come back, so just to say that it's theoretically possible that in a fund that's facing this problem, that there could be some structural problems with the way the accounts are being put together that aren't being identified because the audit hasn't been completed, and that could lead to problems building up which don't get fixed in the future. So it is a problem for the LGPS on the whole, if not for this fund, because we have full confidence in our officers here.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is the key risk. And I think I've mentioned this before when I've advised members that is the key risk, that there will be some underlying issue that goes unidentified for a number of years and may come into light when you have new auditors. So we will be getting a new set of auditors starting from this financial year. We've already started engaging with them. And when they come in, they will do that thorough analysis of what's happened before. They won't necessarily give an opinion on the previous accounts, but that will be a big part of their opening balances to ensure that everything is in order. And then they'll be giving that update on an ongoing basis. But yeah, the longer the issue stands for that is really the key risk that not only LGPS funds faces, local government entities face as a whole.
Apologies, Judge. I know we're going over the ground again, but I just don't want it to get to the point where it just stays there forever and we just treat it as normal.
Yes, I don't think there's any plan to treat as normal. From what I understand, based on the engagement we've had with sort of the external parties, is everyone wants to draw a line on this and to also ensure that it never happens again.
Okay, if there's no other questions, is the risk register noted? Noted, brilliant. Item 10, the LGPS update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just make a brief introduction to this item, and then if it's okay, I'll ask John Raisin to make some comments as he's prepared a paper on this subject matter. So normally when we do an LGPS update, we cover a wide range of issues, but this particular one just focuses on the pensions regulators, the general code. This is a code that was issued on the 10th of January of this year, and essentially the code covers the responsibilities to public service schemes, which include LGPS, and has in the past primarily focused on the governance and the administration side of things. So a lot of the funding and investment issues are covered by the Department for Levelling Up. They make amendments to regulations, and we've participated in the consultation that they've issued before. But this TPR is something somewhat separate and may not have may have bits of it that apply to the LGPS and other bits that do not. So John will obviously talk through his paper. The second thing that this paper is asking for is for the independent advisor to be requested to basically conduct a governance review in light of this TPR code. My understanding is the last time the fund had a governance review was when the previous code was issued, and there was a set of recommendations that came on there, and then there's then a period of implementation. So this will really provide an opportunity for you as members to understand what are the requirements, how the fund can be compliant, and then to build an action plan as to how we go about amending that. So those are the two asks, but before that, I'll just ask John if you're happy to maybe say a bit more about the code.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, I don't tend to go through the paper, but knowing how members here, read papers closely, you'll notice in my paper there's a lot of caution on my behalf, and that's because there are clear uncertainties as to the extent to which this code applies to the LGPS. And if you look on page 53 of the agenda, there's a very clear statement there from the Scheme Advisory Board. So it's not a statement from me, it's a statement from the Scheme Advisory Board. And I'll just read it to you. It says, the Secretariat is studying the code to closely identify any new requirements for funds. And, quote, clarity is required on which parts of the code specifically apply to the LGPS and what these mean for funds and how they should be applied in practice. The SAB will support funds in understanding any new requirements in the code and where necessary will produce new or update existing guidance to assist funds with their responsibilities. The thing is that a lot of what you read in the press relates to the applicability of this to the private sector funds, and its applicability is more wide. For example, the funding and investment areas of this code largely do not apply to LGPS because the regulation of LGPS investment and governance is primarily with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government rather than with the DWP. So that is the essential difference. So what we need to do, I think I've tried to summarise in section 4, what should the Haringey Fund be doing? And essentially it needs to be going through the code now and thinking about it, but particularly looking and engaging with relevant advisors, and that's a matter for the fund in terms of some of the investment consultants, so actuarial firms are clearly covering this, but particularly what the Scheme Advisory Board says, because there are areas of this code which are applicable and we must apply those. And this code does seek to, improve standards of governance and particularly administration. But it is very different in an LGPS fund than it is in a private sector fund, and that's why there's a lot of caution in this paper from me. I'll stop there. I'm, happy to answer any questions.
Councillor White.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask John, because I was just looking in section 4 of your bit, the second bullet point. Assess to what extent, so you're saying that we need to assess to what extent the code is more applicable to us because we've got this joint committee and board. So I'm assuming from that you're implying that it is more applicable. I mean, can you give us any advice on that?
It is more applicable. There's no doubt about that. The extent to which it's more applicable is, I can't comment on definitively, but because the pensions regulator has no authority over a pensions committee, essentially, they do have over a pension board. That's what Code 14 says. Because you're a joint committee and board, therefore the pension regulator has some influence over you. Not as much as the MHCLG does, because the committee, of course, is a decision-making body. The board is an assisting body, and when I did that governance review that Tim talks about in 2016, I tried to separate out what was the role of a pensions committee and what was the role of a pensions board, which wasn't easy because there's actually no absolute definitive guidance on this. And I had to work from quite a lot of papers. So if anyone's ever got insomnia, perhaps you go back and read that. But yeah, there is more requirements on this committee and board, and it's unique apart from Hampshire, the only other one. So, you know, the other 84 are on a different level than you are. So yes, there is a greater responsibility. So the easy example is the training one. You have to do the training because you're a committee and board, because, you know, unbelievably, technically, pension committees are not under statutory requirement to have knowledge and understanding. Pension boards are. So there is a greater thing, but there may be other things in there in terms of the governance elements, particularly. There's 5 areas. In the governance in particular, there may be other areas whereby Haringey is subject to it, where, for example, Barking and Dagenham, which I also work with, wouldn't be. But we need to be, you know, clear of those. The obvious example is that one about training. I don't know, without going through the 171 pages and listening to what SAB might say about how it applies to pension boards, where precisely it is. But yes, that is something we've definitely got to do here. And that's the bullet point, which is different for you than it is for the versions in, well, in Waltham Forest and Barking and Dagenham, for example, where they are, you know, have a separate function. So, but yeah, there is more for you.
I suppose my follow-up question would be, are we expected to do this individually, or are we going to do this, you know, is it going to be coordinated in some way for the PCB to look at the, you know, how we respond to this with, you know, a quite specific situation?
So I think the recommendation is that the PCB agrees for the independent advisor to do this review. Once this review is complete, he will obviously feed back to the PCB. And I'm familiar with John's work. I'm sure it'll be very thorough, and then there'll be an action plan that can then be developed as to how we implement those. I'm not sure at this stage if we can say what those changes are, if there are any material ones, but this is the reason why this governance review needs to be undertaken. Also on the back of the conversations we've had previously about it's been so long since that review was done. So we just bring the committee and board back up to standards. But yeah, there will definitely be a report which will be feeding back, and then there'll be an action plan which will involve all the members.
Could I just say one thing about the timescale? I don't want to be definitive about a timescale. I'll do it as quickly as can. I think September's the nearest, but it does depend to a lot of extent, I think, on what SAB says, because, you know, Scheme Advisory Board are to my mind, the ultimate arbiter of this, because there have been issues between the regulator and the Scheme Advisory Board in the past in terms of, you know, when I say issues between them, determining between themselves where the line falls. And I'm sure that there will be discussions between SAB and the regulator, and we really need to wait for some of those to come out possibly before I can, you know, carry it forward too far. So I can't give you a definitive timescale. I'm hoping it will be September, which I think is the, you know, the reasonable one, but we need to wait to see what comes out, because it's not common for SAB to make, you know, as definitive statements as that, and that's why I put it in. There clearly, you know, are questions about it, and I think some of it's already been resolved by the regulator. I mean, I've heard the regulator on one particular webinar being quite clear about what didn't apply to LGPS but could be adopted, and I think it's that also question about what might be good practice as opposed to what's required, and then you get into a deeper issue there. So, you know, I'll have my views in terms of Haringey, but I think we do need to wait for, you know, Scheme Advisory Board and TPR to make a few more statements as to where they think, you know, they think it literally does fall.
Okay, if there's no other questions, firstly, do we note the paper? And do we agree to commission the independent advisor to undertake a governance review of the fund's governance arrangements? Agreed. Brilliant. Item 11, the LAP update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I'll just introduce this item, which members will be familiar with. It is a standing item for all our meetings, which is the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum update. And this particular update covers the period or the quarter to the 31st of December 2023. So the key highlights really are that there were 44 companies that the LAPF group engaged with and over 10 jurisdictions. And most of this was in the form of several meetings across the UK, really, on environmental risk and supply chain. So I think in previous versions of this, when we've shared it, they normally send letters. So this is a bit of an uptick in their engagement efforts, actually going out to those companies and ensuring that they're engaging directly with those companies. In the chart below, that it just kind of outlines the breakdown of the engagement topics over the quarter. Again, I would engage members. I'm not sure if everyone's got access to this. I would engage members to go onto the website and have a read of the LAPF quarterly report. This is sort of my source material for this. It is very detailed and it's very good in terms of like the wider issues that they're tackling, not only in the UK, but abroad, and maybe of assistance with the wider conversations we might be having with other constituents as well. In terms of voting alerts, there was only one that was issued. It was for BHP. And essentially, the resolutions weren't anything specific other than business as usual, directors going on boards. And LAPF opposed this recommendation, and reading their voting alert, it seemed to be mainly based on the fact that they're just not happy with BHP as a company. So they just recommended that they vote against all those directors. That is a bit of an unusual stance, and for me, kind of highlights that they are looking to focus on BHP in terms of the engagement efforts going forward. As you will see, the vote for the resolutions was overwhelmingly for, and Legal in General also voted in line with the majority. And then that's all to sort of bring up to sort of members' attention at this point, but happy to take any questions.
Go on, Councillor White.
Sorry. Thanks. I mean, I know this is really a report just for noting, but I just wonder, given the emphasis that is put in LAPF on engagement and going to meet senior business leaders in order to have a positive effect on the way that they do business, is there any way of evidencing positive outcomes? Because what we've got here, we've got the list of engagement topics. So we know on what topics LAPF have engaged with companies over the period. Then the voting alerts, which is always quite a depressing thing to look at, because whatever the recommendation is, the outcome of the vote is nearly always the opposite. And we know the reasons for that. But the emphasis is always on, look, we actually go, we have meetings with these business leaders, and we use our collective might as as the local government pensions fund nationally to affect these companies on ESG issues. But is there any way in these reports that we get every time of evidencing any positive outcomes that are coming from that?
It is very difficult to do so, only because when LAPF do any engagement in any individual quarter, the impact of that investment, of that engagement, may show up years later. So I think one of the key things we've referenced is, especially with some of the oil and gas companies, where they've been engaging with them for years, and only about last year, I believe, when we presented one of these reports, is when they actually had a climate report ready. It will be very difficult to sort of track that, because you have to keep track of all the individual voting alerts, which is why I sort of refer members to that report, because in LAPF's own report, they will go into details around what their biggest outcomes were over the quarter, or what the areas of focus are. They also ran a number of seminars and workshops where they detail their work a lot more. The only thing I would probably suggest, not specifically on LAPF, because we do call this a LAPF report, but perhaps the report itself needs to be changed in terms of what it's trying to communicate to members, or how it can be useful to you. And earlier today, we had a conversation from the London Civ, who mentioned that they've got their own governance and voting thing. LAPF, when we report this, is only looking at LGIM, which is now about 40% of the portfolio. London Civ has some active management that we are involved with, particularly the Absolute Return Fund, and perhaps we could ask them for a report on how successful they've been in that approach, as a way of further developing this particular report. I do share the same kind of sentiment in terms of the voting alerts, because I have to read up and compile them, and I'm hoping that, sometimes they do vote in line, but a majority of the time, because of how powerful some of these companies are and their underlying investors, especially the big family companies, it's just hard to get a vote against them. But I welcome any feedback on how we can improve this report to make it more useful for the members in terms of how we engage going forward.
Councillor Ngoran.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-on on that? Is there any way, because I share, your sentiments on this voting record, but we only get a glimpse of it. Is there a possibility of getting a record over the year, what a LAF recommend and how these different funds, particularly the ones that maybe we invest in, vote? Because if every single time they oppose, you could argue, are they really listening to us or LAF?
So this is in terms of legal in general, the asset manager,
Yes.
their annual record.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that'll be easy to compile. We just look at the previous 4 quarters and to put a summary report. I can certainly provide that for members.
Cool. If there are no other questions, this report is noted. Sorry, go on, Tim.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just mindful that I did make a proposal there. It's not a recommendation, but I just wanted to know whether members are content for us to explore the further development of this report, particularly engaging closely with the London CIF, and that can be taken as an action for the minutes.
Okay, brilliant. Moving on to item 12, the quarterly investment performance.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the quarterly investment performance for the quarter ending the 31st of December 2023. As usual, this is another standing item. We did meet about just over a month ago, so the update won't have been much different from what was discussed at the last month. The key thing really to highlight to members is, again, the valuation of the fund, the performance over the period, and also noting that we've had further discussion around how to improve this reporting going forward, and that is something I'll be engaging with one of the members over the spring and the summer, and hopefully in the July meeting we'll have an enhanced reporting report for you as well. The key thing I just really wanted to highlight to members is the progress that we're making. Not sure if I can find it. I'm thinking that just bear with me. All right, okay, so it's section 6.6. So essentially at the last meeting, the Pensions Committee and Board made a decision to revise its asset allocation. So just giving an update to members that the plan to implement the allocation is currently underway. We aim to have that allocation fully completed as of the 31st of March 2024. I have engaged with the chair, with the independent advisor and the investment consultants, and all are on board with that plan. In fact, one of the first implementation will be happening tomorrow, I believe, one of the first trades or the transaction we're making. So at the next meeting, we'll be able to provide you a full report. But this is just to highlight, I think, the feedback at the last meeting that it was good to allocate to this asset class as quickly as possible, and just giving you that confirmation that we have done so.
Councillor Bevan.
Can I ask where it says about gross of fees? Am I correct that this performance showing to get a true figure, it would be less because the fees haven't been accounted for? Have I got that round the right way, or have I got it wrong?
Yes, so you're correct. If what you're suggesting is that these performance figures are inflated than the actuals, then that's correct, because they don't include the impact of fees. The custodian doesn't have access to all the fees that we receive, and they don't include them in their performance report. So this is just pure performance without any other fees charged to the money to the underlying investment managers. So when we do the annual report, that then consider the net fees, because at the end of that year we've seen all the fees, and that will be somewhat different to this particular chart.
Can I just confirm one thing regarding CIV? So the difference between the 77% and the 20%, So is the 20% directly managed by the CIV and then 77% subject to their negotiation, or what's the difference?
Yes, so I think the easiest way to sort of explain it, so using the previous asset allocation, so the investment that we have with Legal & General is not managed by the London CIV, it's managed by Legal & General. But they have an agreement, which is why they consider it an asset under pool management. And I think that was included in the consultation. What that means is the London CIV does some monitoring of that fund to ensure that it is compliant with the requirements of us as an investor through them. The London CIV then set up a few vehicles. I think that there's quite a lot of funds within the pool, which they will directly manage. So I think when we heard them speak earlier, when they're mentioning around their investment process, that's essentially on the direct part and not on the Legal & General. So traditionally, the Legal & General part has been a bigger part of the pool. And, I think we had 47.5% was the previous allocation, which is now dropped to 40%. So our allocation to the London CIV will now be an increase to 27.5%, which is directly managed. On top of that, there's then other asset classes that are not included in the pool, which are just not considered pooled at all. But there may be solutions in the future to include those as part of the London CIV pool.
But that Legal & General bit, why is it considered managed by the pool? What do they do? What do we get for it?
I'm not entirely sure. I think that would have been a good question for the London CIV themselves. But there is, to my understanding, an arrangement that involves a contract and for them to be oversight over that pool. And as a result of that negotiation as well, we are able to access those funds at the lower rates. I think Legal & General will probably give a different perspective on that, but that is certainly the rationale from how I understand it from the pool. One of the things is, I think what makes it the clearest distinction is the London CIV is not the beneficial owner of any of those underlying assets. And as such, they can tell London, the LGIM to do anything differently. They can just have an engagement effort such as they do within their governance and voting requirements. So that is the key distinction, and they charge a very small fee, I think, for that oversight. But the rationale was that it allowed a wider scale of the London funds to be able to access the LGIM's universe at a lower fee. The contrary to that is what was included in the consultation, where all those assets will then be moved to the pool, and there are capacity issues, there are challenges in terms of any other transaction costs. I think Sylvia probably pointed it out earlier, in terms of how that transition would work, would be costly. So as a result, that agreement just stayed in place because trying to move those assets onto the pool, given their resource requirements, how big they are, they will not be able to provide that at the same fee that LGIM is offering, which is also one of the biggest asset managers in the country.
Yeah, I think it's great that we get as much advice as we can. I can just see that there's real risk of duplication at some stage, that you've got investment advisors, then investment managers, then we've got consultancy by CIV. It'd be layers upon layers, and then they were talking about fund of funds. So I just think it's something we should be cognizant of.
Councillor Bevan.
I understood, I might be wrong, but the way that is done with the London CIV and LGIM has led to a reduction in the fees that LGIM charge because of the influence of the CIV. That's what I've heard at other places, so you can tell me if I'm correct, but that's one of the results, as my understanding.
Yes, in effect, a lot of the passive investments are considered quasi-pooled because you're getting the benefit of the reduction in fees, which is part of the point of pooling as well. It also helps address the point that you quite rightly raise, so it avoids making you use the pool to do what LGIM are already doing. So I think it's all working for the fund's benefit.
Brilliant. I was just wondering, John, if you wanted to add anything about markets, potentially the UK market. If there's anything you wanted to add, just because you've wrote a report and you wanted to.
I might add a point about the LGIM issue. I think the other issue is that and I think the CIV acknowledged that. The idea of transferring it under direct CIV ownership, of course, they would then charge a fee on top. So the way it's done at the present is a better way, because the fees are so low anyway with these passive pooled funds. I mean, the fees are extremely low. And if they were transferred under direct, and I think that's why the government didn't push it in the consultation outcome, quite honestly, because the fees are now so low. How are they going to get them much lower? I mean, in some cases, if I recall, I can't remember which one it was, BlackRock or Elgin, the fees, well, it's a public meeting, but the fee's not very high. And to get it even lower would be very difficult. And transfer it under CIV, they'd want a fee, because they would, wouldn't they? Because they're going to do more direct work. They would be entitled to a fee. But what I think they're saying is that they don't see any point to it. What would they add if they actually sat above it legally, as opposed to what they do now, which is have an influence from the side? So I think it works for everyone the way it is at the moment. I think it works for us. I think it works for Elgin, and I think it works for CIV. That's just my thought. If you want to be a comment on anything else, well, yeah, I think what was said by CIV about markets is probably very true. They do seem, where are they going? I don't think any of us know, and if we, we honestly don't. They are extremely high, but I think for anyone to make a prediction about where they're going would be very questionable. But they are extremely high at the moment. But they've been extremely high. Japanese markets just reached a, was it 30, however many year high, isn't it? Since 1989, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it's ludicrously overvalued in 1989.
Yeah.
It hit 39,000.
Yeah.
And it's just got back.
It's just got above it. So I'm not going to comment on anything else, but things can go up and stay up and keep going up, or they can go like Japan. We don't know. So I wouldn't like to comment beyond that.
I think the problem is the leadership. We've got actually 7 companies dominating the movement of the index. And while you have indices which are capitalization weighted, the bigger those companies get, the more dominant they are in giving the impression that the index is moving. There are other parts of the companies which are actually, so you've got those which are very expensive, and you've got other companies which really aren't so expensive. And so if you looked at other means, you might get a different view. And this is why I think the reporting that we've had is hopeless. I mean, I've been trying to reformat it in a way that I can understand. Maybe other people could as well. That's one thing. One of the first things I noticed in doing this was that our exposure to the UK equity market is 31% of our equity. And considering the UK is 3% of the world index, you say, well, why? I mean, are we so confident about the UK outperforming the rest of the world that we have that position? And also picking up the numbers that Tim made about, I mean, we're showing for the last year in this report, our return of something like 6.9 for the year against our benchmark of 10, something roughly like that. Well, that's the benchmark we made ourselves. You got the 6.9 is not as high as that. It may be lower, 6% or something once you take into account fees. That one benchmark is the one we made, 10%. The world index was up 15%. So it's not just saying we're slightly below. Maybe we're a lot below what was investably available. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get everything right. You need to have diversification, but really, it's not a way of. We're not in a position where to ask the right questions. What you want to see is look at those numbers and say, well, why is that? That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to do with Tim. So.
Yes, now I'm confident we'll get there, and we'll have a more positive update for members at the July meeting.
Cool. So we'll note the quarterly investment performance. Moving on to item 13, which is the forward plan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So item 13 is the forward plan, and it's essentially presented to the Pensions Committee and Board to seek your views and to also provide input into future agendas. So this particular forward plan looks at the investment strategy review work that was currently underway for most of last year, It also looks at the development of the responsible investment policy and also the funds governance review. So in section 6.6, I've kind of outlined a rough plan of the key priorities and the proposed work plan over the next 9 to 12 months. The first thing to mention is agreeing changes to the ISS, which was done at the 30th January meeting. That is now underway, and we hope that will be completed by the 31st of March 2024. Then there is the process to set responsible investment objectives, and the PCB has already had some discussions around this and the approach that we will take. We are working on providing or producing a detailed plan of that, which will involve the selection of specialist advisors to be able to support the PCB on that work. And then during the same period, as discussed in an earlier item, there will be a fund governance review, which will be undertaken by the independent advisor. That's going to be a key theme throughout the year. So for a date there up to the 31st of December 2022. And then between now and then, it might be useful for members to suggest any areas of particular focus in the rest of the investment portfolio. There have been discussions on the development of any indices in regards to the listed equities. There's been discussion on a wider review of the private markets. I can't remember the last time when we've done a comprehensive review. That might be something that might be worth exploring over the next 12 months or so. So it's just to provide an opportunity for members to provide any feedback on the proposed plan and anything else that needs to be included in terms of specific investment opportunities to help with prioritizing the work over the next 12 months.
John.
Just to clarify on the governance review, I should have mentioned it earlier. I mean, it will go wider than just, the new code. It'll cover the sort of issues that we covered in the last 2016 governance review, which I think, covered way more than that. So it'll cover everything from risk management to sort of, some issues of pensions admin to, how we deal with the appointments of consultants and actuaries, etc. So it'll be broad ranging. It won't just be on the new code. Anyone who's got access to the 16, I know Keith will have access to it, and John will. It will follow something of that. It won't be exactly that, but it'll be those sort of themes, or some of them.
Councillor Bevan.
I think you said it. I think it's really important that considers the capacity within the team, considering how complex everything keeps getting more and more complex continuously. And these pension professionals are quite old in a lot of places, and they'll all be retiring, and there's no one being trained to nationwide to sort of replace. Although we've got an apprenticeship, I think, haven't we? We're trying to get another one. But I think that whole issue of capacity and the complexity of everything needs to be part of the review.
I can certainly cover it to some extent. Obviously, I'm not part of, Haringey HR, so I can't put numbers on. But I think I can make some general comments, and I've done that in my role as independent advisor to the Merseyside Fund about resourcing and highlighted that. And you're absolutely right, Councillor Bevan, to have raised that. I will put something in it. I can't, I can't say you should have X number of officers or Y numbers. But yes, you're right, and I will seek to at least highlight that so that it comes back and you can think about those issues. I'll talk to Tim and Jamie about how we might do that without me overstepping the mark into officer territory.
Yes, the only other thing I was going to mention that I forgot to sort of bring up was with regards to the training plan. So it's just a reminder, and I don't know if it's actually in this report, is I think a few meetings ago we agreed to start using Hyman's learning portal. I believe it's called Lola. But I'm not sure whether members have had access to that yet and have started working on some of those courses. So it's just a reminder, and if you have not got access to that, please do let us know. And yeah, Jamie will be able to provide you with that access. But it's something that we'll be starting to monitor from next year going forward. I think Officer Hammonds are here. I don't know if they want to say a few words about the product itself, but it is something that will be helpful for members to keep up to date with the changes, even some of the things we've discussed today, such as the TPR code.
Thanks, Tim. The Lola portal is really been designed with members in mind. It's very much bite-sized, it's accessible, you can go back to it as often as you need to, you can recover things, and you don't have to cover things that you already feel very comfortable with. So it's very much designed for your use, to be of benefit to you, and we do encourage you to engage with it in a way that suits you best.
Just an operational question for me. With the responsible investment objectives, is that going to be affected with the pre-election period at all? Because that would, I guess, lengthen timeframes.
It shouldn't, but it's something I would need to discuss with the governance team, particularly in terms of the PERDA period. The next time the Pensions Committee and Board would meet would be in July, but it's whether any offline meetings can be held before that. So I'll just need that clarification. And if not, we might just have to have some other calls, some shorter meetings in terms of the time period to get that advice. But we'll try as best as possible to stick to the timeline that's been agreed.
If there's no other questions, do we note the progress made towards the agreed key priorities outlined in section 6 of this report, specifically in relation to the investment strategy review, responsible investment policy, and fund governance review? Yep. And yeah, we have the opportunity to identify any additional matters or training requirements as we go forward with this. Item 14, there is no new items of urgent business. The dates of future meetings are TBC for me. And yeah, we will move on to the exclusion of press and the public. So items 17 and 19 are likely to be subject to a motion to exclude the press and public from the meeting